Kanye West is a terrible person with a tragic story. And today, in my last video covering the Drake vs. the World feud of 2024, we'll be looking to his long and storied relationship with Drake and all of its twists and turns along the way. It's important to remember that Kanye's mental state is a question mark. He was previously diagnosed with bipolar disorder, but believes that it was a misdiagnosis and that he actually has autism, although that isn't officially diagnosed. Now, this story's going to be complicated, and my notes on it will tell you that. And it certainly isn't one-sided. Both artists are in the wrong, but let's find out why. From Drake's earliest years in the scene, he's credited Kanye as his biggest musical influence and inspiration, the person whose sound and artistry he's pulled the most from. And so working with his idol was a dream come true, and symbolized his meteoric rise to the forefront of rap and music. Not only did Kanye give Find Your Love to him, but he also directed the music video to Best I Ever Had, meaning that Kanye had some role in Drake's two biggest songs as his career took off. And Kanye seemingly really valued this mentorship role over an artist that was destined for greatness who appreciated his greatness in turn. But something we'll have to do throughout their story is separate performing for the cameras and true intentions. Because our first sign of tension, if you want to use that word, is Watch the Throne. First of all, Drake believed Kanye and Jay-Z stole the idea of doing a collaborative album from his planned collab album with Lil Wayne, who was beefing with Jay-Z at this time along with Birdman, meaning Young Money as a whole. And as Lil Wayne's soldier and Young Money member, Drake stood on the side of his boss as he came for the throne. Now, Drake didn't view any of this as personal, but rather competitive sport and music, pushing each other to go harder and fuel healthy competition. And this was something that Kanye didn't like. He preferred it when Drake was this meek artist who idolized him, but as Drake became a star in his own right, he stopped viewing these guys as idols and icons, but as equals and competitors. But this was something that bubbled beneath the surface. Like I said, Drake didn't view any of this as personal, or at least not outwardly, and neither did Kanye. But when Drake's sophomore album Take Care outperformed Watch the Throne and then won a Grammy over it, someone as narcissistic as Kanye wasn't going to smile at the success of someone he deemed his disciple. And as Kanye revealed at OVO Fest 2013, Drake was the catalyst sparking that album, as these goats wanted to lay down the law as greats over these rookie newcomers thinking they could rival them. But I do think Kanye's speech here is really important in their relationship. It's obviously a moment that means a lot to Drake. He was still seeking validation, and getting that from Kanye, someone he idolized at his own festival that was headlined by countless other star performers, was clearly a surreal moment. And their kind words to each other that night was a rare moment of vulnerability and appreciation in the tensely macho world of rap and hip-hop. And the positive relationship continued into 2014, although with the media trying to twist words and instigate drama between Drake and Kanye, as Drake called some of Ye's lyrics on his new Yeezus album questionable, leading Drake to defend himself as misquoted and misunderstood. Those thoughts didn't mean he didn't still love Kanye and respect him, and Kanye took a whole 20 minutes out of his set in New Jersey to address this too, mostly attacking the media industry for continuously trying to pit artists and rappers against one another. And those two separate events of them expressing their love and respect for each other was really exercised later in the year at Wireless Festival. Drake had pulled out late due to an illness, but managed to get Kanye to step in for him on late notice. But what I love about this moment is how Kanye didn't just take over the set and make it a Ye thing. He still gave the fans at least some version of Drake that they were hoping for as he performed headlines, All Me, and We Made It. It shows that they were more than just peers and that a relationship was there. But the concern with Kanye is always his true motives and feelings that he can seemingly expertly mask. And again, it forces us to make tough considerations. Does he genuinely harbor hate and envy, as we'll get into, or do they slip out in moments of weakness? The Blessing story in 2015 is always a telling event in this. So you might recall that the original version of the track is Big Sean and Drake, and then the deluxe extended version adds Kanye. There's the story behind that. Kanye was heavily involved in the whole album making process, but that song seemed to be a late addition and was basically finished right at the finish line, even after the album had already been pushed back past its original scheduled release. When Kanye found out about the Drake feature and song, he demanded to be on the song too. And while both Sean and Drake didn't think it needed another verse, nor did Sean think there was enough time to get it done, he couldn't stop his boss from getting his way. And years later, after Sean and Kanye's relationship had completely broken down, which is a story of its own, he revealed that this was a key moment in Drake and Ye's history and the moment Kanye ruined the relationship. Kanye thought that Big Sean picked Drake over him, and this is an insecurity that will appear throughout their feud. Kanye feeling less than and replaced by Drake. Now, I think this shows his insane narcissism of thinking that one of his artists can't work with any artist but him. But more specifically, it's tied to Drake, and rooted in this silent battle between the two. One that Kanye seemed to be fighting in alone at this point. So this little outburst by Kanye was one of the first times that his true feelings reared its head, and notably was only revealed to the public years later as this all happened behind the scenes. Because in front of the cameras, Kanye was one of Drake's biggest supporters, even defending him amid the height of Drake's feud with Meek Mill and his ghostwriting allegations. Kanye called him one of the most talented artists of our generation live on the radio, and thought that questioning his pen was a lazy way to undercut his brilliance and tear him down. And this takes us to 2016, which marks their happiest period together as friends and neighbours. The way they describe hanging out at each other's homes in Calabasas reminds me of Friends after school, with Ye talking to Drake's mum in the kitchen and popping in whenever they wanted to. But there is another example of Kanye's insecurity plaguing him during this time, despite their seemingly strong friendship that we'll get to. Drake started the year off with Summer 16 and his bigger pool than Ye bar, which he viewed as a friendly neighborhood jab and a bit of banter. But when Kanye was asked about it, he didn't confirm or deny it, but instead let people know that he has 3 pools. And then TMZ reported that Kanye had dug up his pool and was intent on making a man-made lake, which to me shows the insecurity of a man not allowing someone to one-up him in any way. To Kanye, he's still the top dog, and any sign of Drake contesting that isn't a slight he's gonna let slide. Now so far, I've mainly been taking fire at Kanye and noticing his flaws and part to play in these tiffs and spats, but Drake needs to be questioned too. You could argue, what's his intention with a line like that? We know how desperately Drake wanted to be in those GOAT conversations and in that tier of icons in rap and hip-hop. So it was a line that was meant to compare himself alongside the greats like Ye, but he also implies that he's bigger. And no rapper is just going to accept that and be like, good one bro, you got me. See you at the cookout on Sunday, yeah? And Kanye reveals later on that he feels like Drake kept playing all these little games with him over the years that wore him down and likely contributed to some kind of mental spiral that he has. And Kanye can trace it back all the way to this moment. But there seemed to be, at least on a performative or superficial level, a friendship there. Could they have harbored hate, jealousy, or any other feelings for each other secretly? Of course. But that's like hanging out with a friend that you really hate all the time. Why would you do that? And speaking of the happy times, let's get to it, even if it is ultimately short-lived. First of all, a collaborative album was in the works, titled Wolves or Calabasas is the New Abu Dhabi. It does seem like this is something that Kanye was pushing for more, with Drake being a little more hesitant, especially after just releasing his collaborative album with Future. But many sessions happened, resulting in all kinds of things. For example, we know that Glow was a product of these sessions, although the song was originally Party Next Door's. We also know that they finished a song with Future together and had even worked with Young Thug and likely others too. So it was definitely a real thing, at least for fun, with songs being made and slapped on a hard drive. And more tangibly, we can see evidence of them working together on each other's 2016 albums, The Life of Pablo and Views, respectively. With just a single feature between the two projects, they have credits on each other's albums reflecting this collaborative period they shared. Drake had writing credits on 30 Hours, his Jumpman was interpolated on Facts, and Kanye was really proud to sample a relative of Drake's, Larry Graham, on No More Parties in LA. I thought that little detail was cool because it was something Kanye was proud about. He took pride in giving Drake and his family's music a second life through his own music, and it became something they bonded over. Meanwhile, Kanye was more involved on the producing side of Views, being involved in both You With Me and Feel No Ways, and then featuring on Popstar. And let's talk about Popstar. Drake wasn't thrilled about how this song came about, mainly the way Jay-Z was added in. Drake has had his issues with Jay-Z and specifically wanted Kanye on the song. But it was Ye who offered to include Jay-Z, thinking that it was going to be a huge moment for music with the throne coming back together on this track. Now, this album was really personal to Drake, so I can totally understand how someone else taking creative initiative on your work would rub you the wrong way, especially when this legendary reunion was basically a line from Jay-Z. And I feel like it was a little self-serving from Kanye too, but at the time, he understood the industry better than anyone else. Maybe Kanye was trying to be a good friend and genuinely give Drake a cool moment, and maybe mend his relationship with Jay-Z while he's at it. Or maybe he wanted this moment to overshadow Drake's album and make himself the talking point. The only thing that pushes me back from this idea is why not do it on his own project, other than the psychological act of outshining Drake on his own album, and Drake eventually opted to release his album with the solo version. But again, it seemed like things were genuinely fine between them. Drake called Kanye one of his favourite people in the world, a really good guy and a role model. He gives him credit for where he's standing in 2016 as someone who opened doors for him, and that they have a special friendship that he truly values. This glowing praise would be an elaborate ruse if it was meant for the cameras, and we do have solid enough references by way of these collaborations to give us no reason to really doubt this. But it seems to sour shortly after, and maybe at first due to Drake's Two Birds One Stone diss aimed at Kanye's Good Music members, Pusha T and Kid Cudi. And while he doesn't diss Kanye on the track, inciting this war with his label and friends might have impacted him and definitely complicated things. And a month later, in the Sacramento leg of his St. Pablo tour, Kanye cuts his performance and has an infamous onstage rant, in which he calls out Drake and DJ Khaled for free, claiming that it was set up to be a hit song by the radio. He prefaces his frustration in comments by declaring his love for both Drake and Khaled, but this sort of comment could be another instance of his flippant relationship with Drake and another subtle showing of envy and jealousy. But just 2 days later, Kanye cancels the remaining month and a half of his tour due to stress and sleep deprivation. He's also hospitalized and placed in rehab where he's diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and then steps away from the spotlight for all of 2017. Drake addressed Kanye's comments a few months later and revealed that something changed with Kanye, and he said that it's not the first time he's had a situation like this with him either. And this to me shows the start of a real divide between them, as Drake seems to be catching on to this dark side of Kanye that overtakes him at times. Kanye returns in 2018 to what would be an even more destructive year. It starts off with good intentions as Kanye uses his sway, influence, and what's left of his friendship with Drake to facilitate a meeting between him and Kid Cudi to squash their beef. And this seemingly goes well enough for Kanye to then invite Drake to Wyoming to work on some new music with him, and for Drake to actually come. And two huge things happen here. First of all, let's talk about Lift Yourself. You probably remember this track coming out, remember Poopty Scoop? Well, Drake agreed to buy it from Kanye when he first heard it as a simple beat during this visit for $3 million. And while it seemed all but done, within a month, Kanye instead kept it for himself and ruined the beat for anyone else by doing what he did to it. It seemed like the ultimate troll to somebody, supposedly Ebro, but maybe Drake too, with no other explanation, filling the song with unserious raps. And this is a great example of being unable to read someone like Kanye, because despite what I said, their relationship wasn't completely over. Drake came out to Wyoming to help Kanye work on music after all, but you would think something must have ticked him off to do something like that. Only Kanye knows if he was trying to make a statement, slap Drake in the face, or make a little joke. The other big event that happened here in Wyoming was Drake revealing that he had a son to Kanye. It was something only his close friends knew, and he decided to play March 14 for Kanye and fill him in on this big personal news. And again, this goes to show that they did have a real friendship at one point, and maybe Drake was trying to confide in his friend that he once had in Calabasas. And trust me, we'll get to the horrible stuff that Drake did too, but seeing how these following few months unfold, you can understand why Drake would hate Kanye and cut ties with him. So if Lift Yourself was any sign of betrayal, Kanye's involvement in Drake's Pusha T beef was the knife in his back. I briefly mentioned that they were beefing on two birds one stone, but it started long before that, seemingly in 2011 when Pusha T made a diss track to Drake following his bars on Dreams Money Can Buy, which suddenly dissed a lot of people, like Jay-Z, maybe Kanye, and most definitely Clips, a duo he used to love. Anyway, war broke loose at the end of May when Pusha T teased and coaxed Drake into responding, only to hit him with a haymaker. His first track, Infrared, called into question Drake's lyrical authenticity and pen, something he had to defend and regain his honor for. But what likely hurt more was the fact that Kanye produced this track. Now you can have your own opinion on this. Should Kanye have bowed out of this conflict and not contributed to a song that targeted his friend? Probably. But he's also a musician and decorated producer who produced all of Daytona and had writing credits on every song too. Drake's bars on his response track, Duppy Freestyle, let it be known how he felt about the situation. He claims that if ghostwriting is such a disgrace, what does he think about Kanye tapping Drake's pen? And he name drops 3 songs, likely inferring that Kanye got Drake's help to write his verse for each. Drake never thought that Kanye would need help in that department as someone who's lauded as one of the goats of rap, and definitely one of Drake's. He also didn't expect to have to help Kanye out in a pinch financially when he had $53 million of debt in 2016 as someone who was seen as incredibly business savvy. I can't break down every line of their entire feud in this video without it being 17 hours long, but I'll leave a link to my Google Doc in the description with all my notes for this video and a lyrical breakdown if there are any lyrics that you're interested in specifically. Continuing from that ghostwriting point though, Drake ironically just wrote the hook of Yikes and recorded its reference track while in Wyoming, giving Kanye an idea of how that song would work, but was left uncredited. And this is basically Drake saying enough is enough. He feels like he's done nothing but helped Kanye and been a friend, only to be stabbed in the back like this, and senses that Kanye really does harbour envy or hate for him deep within him. The other notable jab is Drake's bars on Virgil Abloh. Kanye and Virgil go way back to pink polos and share a love for fashion. They were seen as brothers, but all that changed when Virgil took Kanye's dream job as the head menswear designer at Louis Vuitton, leaving the head position of Kanye's own creative brand, Donda. If you have any doubts about the type of person Kanye is, the way this changed his relationship with Virgil should make it abundantly clear. He was beside himself, both furious and envious of his supposed friend's success, feeling betrayed. Drake calls out Kanye as selfish. You should want your friends and family to succeed, flourish, reach their potential, and be happy. But Drake now sees Kanye as a leech and a serpent, holding people back to advance himself as someone two-faced and hiding his true intentions behind a smile. And Kid Cudi, a former close friend of Kanye, corroborates this. He personally felt disturbed by the way that Kanye spoke about Virgil after this, saying that his comments were, quote, some of the most evil, vile, disturbing, fucked up things he's ever heard when Virgil was described as an angel to everyone. And Virgil's eventual passing didn't change Kanye's thinking. The main words I'm trying to drill into your head about Kanye, as evidenced by the way he treated a friend who was even closer to him than Drake, is insecurity, jealousy, and envy. But right now, Drake's explosive response seemingly was exactly what Pusha T wanted, already having the story of Adidon lined up and ready to end Drake. And this doubled Drake's reason to be angry at Kanye as it revealed various details about Drake's hidden son. You could argue that Kanye gave this information to Pusha T after push had come to shove from Drake, pun intended, but I think it's more reasonable to think that this was premeditated, not only to boost sales, but to win a war, not have another battle. But to be fair, there are mixed reports on Kanye's involvement in all this. Obviously, Drake is connecting Ye's involvement on the album and the reveal of his son as all too convenient. For the sake of brevity and cohesion of this video, rapper Consequence leaked a text thread from 2021 between Kanye and Pusha T this year in 2025, in which he remains consistent in defending himself and denying being the one to leak this, even in this private text thread to his who would be co-conspirator, which makes me think he's telling the truth. And it becomes pretty well known that this beef does a lot of harm to Kanye's mental health, and in turn his family and private life. But back to the height of this beef, Pusha T remains adamant that he received this information from a girl who was seeing Noah 40 Shabib, one of Drake's best friends. So is Drake jumping the gun in making this connection? Possibly. And you can imagine how devastating that would be. One of your friends accusing that you did this horrible thing to them. What's going to sway your opinion on this feud is who you believe. Did Kanye betray Drake's trust by feeding personal information to one of his biggest enemies? Or did Drake reach this conclusion and not allow another possibility to be true? Because Drake condemned Kanye to this fate by doing so, essentially making him dead to him, believing that this is how things transpired. And despite me thinking that the latter is true, what makes it difficult to judge are the inconsistencies, games, and acts we have to look past. Kanye saying one thing while another thing is true wouldn't be all that surprising. Kanye then released his album Ye amid the height of this feud just days after it all went down with the story of Adidon, with Drake releasing Scorpion a month later, feeling a need to touch up some lyrics and revise some things following this, despite the album being practically done before it all kicked off. Again, breaking down all the potential disses and jabs will take days, so instead let's look at the lyrics that seemingly reference another point of their beef and feud. And that is a name that's been suspiciously absent from this video as of yet, but will play a big role in how things escalate in the future, and that name is Kim Kardashian. Kim and Ye have been married for some time now, but rumours had always circulated around Kim and Drake, that they had some kind of on and off relationship before she married Kanye. Even that Drake's decision to move to Hidden Hills was motivated to be closer to her. They have a weird relationship, and one that becomes increasingly one-sided as time goes on. But this is the start of Drake's psychological war on Kanye, where he alludes to loving Kiki, creeping down the block, and keeping his girl company when he leaves her lonely. And this is something that Drake never addresses, but forces Kanye to internalize and question, which I think plays some role in their eventual divorce when Kanye believes that she is cheating on him with Drake. And this is dirty from Drake to me. I feel like this is a line crossed, especially if it did break up a home, while Kanye obviously deserves some blame for that too in the end. Now, Kim denied this vehemently, and Kanye called out Drake for acting dumb as he pretended to not understand why people were thinking this. Either way, it was clearly affecting the family. Then, later in the year, Drake featured on Travis Scott's Sicko Mode, who was essentially Kanye's brother-in-law at this time due to their relationships within the Kardashian-Jenner family. It was one of Drake's most direct disses or threats to Kanye, and it would serve as an underpinning issue that Kanye would refer to in future Twitter rants. And speaking of which, let's dive into those, because it became something he was notorious for, and he had two Twitter tirades of note to close out 2018. The first was in early September, and were apologetic for the most part. What makes Kanye's tweets like this stand out is his lack of filter, and the rare way that he doesn't subliminally hint at people, but instead is forthright in who he's addressing. So he apologizes about his involvement in infrared specifically, saying that he should never be attached to something that pushes negative energy toward Drake. And in this fairly measured tweet, he understands everybody's perspective, but reassures Drake that he wasn't the one to spill his secret. That's a line he would never cross. And he also apologizes about the Lift Yourself situation, realizing that he should have waited and come through on their discussion of working on the song together. Now, this does conflict with what Drake told us about the song, that he was buying it from Kanye, so either Kanye was trying to insert himself into it and this was his stipulation for Drake to take the song, or it was understood that he would produce whatever this track would be. Either way, these tweets were all extremely tame in comparison to what's to come. Drake would reveal his side of the story a month later on LeBron James's The Shop. And then 2 months after that, Drake needed Kanye to sign off and clear his sample of Say You Will for Drake's streaming re-release of Say What's Real and So Far Gone. And this was the catalyst for Kanye's tweets this night in pretty comedic fashion as he mocked the absurdity of the situation with somebody who seemed to hate him so much yet needed a favor from him. Now, he goes off and sends out a ton of tweets this night, but there's a few that I want to draw your attention to. It's here where Kanye reveals that he's felt tension in their relationship for a long time, seemingly since the pool bar from Summer 16. Kanye feels like Drake has been provoking and testing him for years and has been fake all along, playing industry games with him and trying to break him. On the other hand, Drake sees it the other way around, with Kanye being fake and having ulterior motives this whole time. Another thing that Kanye references consistently is his idol status in Drake's life. This is something Kanye holds on to this day. He thinks that Drake should always bow down to him and treat him with respect because of that. The next major event and symbolic washing of hands of the situation from Drake's perspective is his biggest tell-all interview at the close of 2019. Kanye inevitably comes up as a topic, and Drake gives him his respect as his idol and his biggest musical inspiration, like he did a decade ago. He doesn't try to renege that or take that away from Ye. But when suggested by the interviewers, Drake agrees that the biggest conflict of his career is with Kanye. Not Meek Mill, not Kendrick, not The Weeknd. He even calls his battle with Pusha T a sidebar from his bigger war with Ye. In fact, he thinks that Kanye recruited Pusha T as someone who shared a similar level of hate for Drake to team up and take him down. And he says that no matter what Kanye says in front of cameras and microphones, it's not love. And to Drake, it feels like it never has been. He knows that Kanye's attempts to downplay the disputes with his online olive branches and apologies are fake. And this changes a lot. It makes us rethink their good times and when things went bad. Which could be day one if we believe that Kanye had these envious thoughts and insecurities from the very start and the making of Watch the Throne. Or was it something that evolved and revealed itself over time in different moments, like Kanye's outburst with blessings or his rant about for free? The most powerful quote that sums up this whole separation and their issues is Drake knowing that something bothers Kanye deeply inside of him. But Drake makes it clear that it's a personal issue that he can't fix for Kanye. And this sounds a lot like that insecurity and envy that keeps popping up and revealing itself like it did with Virgil and seemingly Drake too. It's resulted in a two-faced friendship that's been littered with ulterior motives and a one-sided grudge. And Drake closes the book in their story by admitting that he doesn't care for a reunion at this point, but wishes him well on his new journey in life as he stepped away from secular music and focused on wellness and faith. Or so he said. Both these guys really can't get enough of each other. Drake continues making allusions to Kim specifically and even name drops Ye a few times in the following years. The first comes on Grease, another Drake and DJ Khaled collab, and Kanye seems to believe that this is definitely directed to him and Kim. And there are even a few more lines on the song that could be tied to them as further shots in Drake's psychological war with Ye. And then on Laugh Now Cry Later, there are a ton more Kanye jabs. Basically, these two songs alone by this point don't show any sign of an end to their feud like Drake said there would be, and it's all coming from his end. He said he was tired of all the beef and negativity of his life over the past few years and was hoping to head into 2020 and beyond with more peace, but he doesn't show any sign of closing their chapter. And there are two more songs in 2021 that specifically reference Yeezy and Ye, which dismiss ideas of those 2020 songs being old and products of the past. Drake clearly wasn't done and over things. Although Wants and Needs is less negative and actually hints at some kind of reconciliation and reunion, tying that in with Kanye's born-again Christianity and ideas of forgiveness. Whereas on Betrayal with Trippie Redd, Drake jokes about the older ages of Pusha T and Ye and their desperate attempts to remain relevant, and that they're still clinging onto their hate for him. Now from the outside, it seems like it's Drake who's holding onto this grudge, but perhaps things are happening behind the scenes that we don't know about. One thing we do know about and is addressed in this song is Kanye's plan to release his Donda album just days before Drake drops his Certified Lover Boy. This isn't something new and is actually something Drake has noticed for years, as Kanye seems intent on challenging Drake's sales and pitting their albums against each other. Shortly after Betrayal came out, Kanye responded to these lyrics by posting a screenshot of a group chat with Pusha T and seemingly Drake, Virgil and others, entering his Evil Joker arc and not allowing Drake to bully him. And as a final response, he also doxes Drake's home address in Toronto, which Drake responds to quickly by simply laughing because this devastating leak was already out there and known. But it showed how they each viewed this situation, with Drake laughing about things, feeling comfortable and safe in this game and war, while Kanye is angry and bitter and desperate to strike back and shut him up. And so we get to September 2021 with Donda releasing 3 days before CLB. Noticeably, while Drake's Certified Lover Boy is ripe with disses and subliminals to a whole host of people with plenty at Kanye, Donda actually doesn't have much for Drake, at least officially. But let's start with CLB. A notable theme going forward in Drake's music is his realization that not everybody in the industry is his friend, even when they might pretend to be to his face. This could easily be inspired by his friendship with Kanye. But despite there being a ton of bars and references we can tie to Kanye on this project, the most direct diss comes on 7 AM on Bridal Path. Not only does the song contain the most disses we can trace to Kanye confidently, but also the title itself is a reference to Kanye's attempt to dox his address, which he owns on his timestamp title. There are a few key things that Drake covers on this song. One is Kanye's lies and two-faced nature, outwardly wanting peace and friendship while still resenting him behind closed doors. He mocks how Kanye's mental instability and crippling jealousy have both contributed to his unceremonious downfall. And along with that idea, like he's done over his entire career really, is jabs at how some of his idols and the greats of an older generation are passing to the wayside as he overtakes them, while Kanye lives in denial that they're equals, or that he can claim ownership over some of Drake's success. On the other side of things, Kanye's diss was actually scrapped from the final release of Donda, but was still played and leaked by Drake on his radio show to show the world what Kanye thought of him and was really capable of. This original version of the song was scrapped and omitted for apparently one key reason, and that was Kanye's changed stance on profanity and his use of it in his music. But the original verse included a ton of Drake disses. Kanye flexes his impact and legacy, taking responsibility for birthing Drake and his sound as his biggest inspiration, a dynamic and thought that's always existed between them. He specifically cites 808s and Heartbreak like Drake did on that Rap Radar interview to prove that Drake's his son and a disciple of his. He then mentions Virgil and Drake by name, so we don't have to guess who these bars relate to, as he clarifies that this beef is not about something trivial. But this likely relates more to his issue with Virgil, which isn't the point of this video. He then references a few women who might have been involved with Drake for a time, and threatens to buy the team that works on Drake's Nocta brand as another sort of threat. But more interestingly, he references their joint album and suggests that from his perspective, he thought they were friends and a duo of some kind, primed to take over rap and music together as allies. So he still combats any notion of his envy and insecurities, viewing himself as misjudged in their dispute, wrongfully convicted of crimes against Drake. But like he said in his 2018 Twitter rants, he's sick of being bullied and pushed around by Drake. He warns him that he should be careful, referencing a gang from Chicago's South Side, Gangsta Disciples, which ironically later links them to a reunion. But the final lines confirm that Kanye sees their artistry as a war of influence and sales, as their album drop suggests. He wants to be the king of the summer and outperform this usurper, reclaiming his throne, if he viewed himself as ever losing it. Now, Kanye's had a few controversial moments in interviews, and some of his worst come out on Drink Champs. 2 months after these albums, he would make his first appearance on the podcast. This one is tame in comparison to future appearances, but he does reveal a lot about the Kim and Drake angle. For reference, Kim filed for divorce earlier in the year. Kanye goes off on Drake, continuously alluding to sleeping with Kim in his music, insisting that despite Drake saying that he hasn't, he acts like he did, and that's bad enough. And in a similar way, he supposedly accused Drake to his face, stating that he knows what he's doing, that Drake implies these suggestive things to deliberately annoy him and then acts like he doesn't get why Kanye's mad. And trust me, we'll get to the Drake and Kim part of the story, which is weird, but I don't think they had an affair, and I can instead definitely see Drake being petty here, doing this on purpose, and gaslighting Kanye into thinking he's crazy. But funnily enough, everything would change in 3 days when Kanye read an apology to Drake and invited him to join and perform at his Larry Hoover benefit concert. He reads out this apology declaring his hope to end their beef once and for all, putting it to rest and reuniting to stand for something bigger than themselves. And notably, he does this standing beside Jay Prince, someone who Drake sees as a father figure and has mediated some other feuds in Drake's life before this. He was actually the one who stopped Drake from responding to the story of Adidon, knowing that what Drake made was crossing a line that he could never recover from if he went through with it. So a month later, we see pictures of them looking so happy next to each other as they met up to squash their beef prior to this performance. And this picture alone should have told us that this was a tenuous reunion at best. But they served a greater purpose through this act, promoting peace as 2 of hip-hop's biggest stars and noted rivals. Jay Prince revealed a few more details about this in an interview, saying that Larry Hoover was actually the one who planted the seed for this to happen, wanting to see Drake and Kanye, 2 of his favourite artists, come together in the name of peace. You might be asking, who is Larry Hoover? I'll cover that briefly because there's still so much Drake and Kanye related stuff to cover. He was the former leader of Gangsta Disciples, that gang from Chicago's South Side, and is still serving 6 life sentences for his alleged involvement in a gang-related murder, being in jail since 1973. Kim and Kanye actually lobbied to have his sentence reduced in 2018, so this wasn't completely out of the blue. But it was seen as an opportunity to bring light to this injustice, spearheaded by Jay Prince, Larry Hoover's son, and Kanye. Jay Prince knew that meeting behind that photo on November 15th was going to be a heated exchange, but they needed to give each other the opportunity to air their grievances and sit across from each other. And Jay Prince deserves the bulk of the praise for this whole reunion happening, as they clearly just shelved their issues, recognizing that this was a larger-than-life opportunity that required them to tap into an energy greater than the anger they feel for each other. But something else tragic happened during this time that no doubt played a role in this reunion too, and that was the passing of Virgil Abloh, who lost his battle with cancer. Jay Prince says that Virgil loved both Drake and Kanye deeply, and he knew that Kanye loved Virgil too, despite what he might have said in the past. But he believes that Virgil passed away, at least being happy knowing that his friends were reunited and on good terms again. And the Free Larry Hoover benefit concert happened on December 9th, 2021, marking the first time that Drake and Kanye had shared a stage since OVO Fest 2016. It's a surreal event if you haven't watched it on YouTube, and the performance had a lot of kind gestures as they faithfully performed each of each other's songs and said some nice things. The first musical olive branch was Kanye covering one of their first collaborations, a song he made and produced, Find Your Love. When Kanye passed it over to Drake, he covered his favourite song from Donda, 24, and he changed the song's ending to symbolise him buying into their reunion. I think it was cool that Drake opted to play a new Kanye song, showing that he did still care about his idol's new music. But of course, if we're being cynical, this whole thing could have been for the cameras. They closed the night performing Forever and embraced before walking off the stage together, laughing, and overall showcasing some semblance of friendship returning. For almost a year, that was the last image they left, a united stand and reunion between 2 old friends. But as Kim and Kanye's divorce creeps closer to official, he becomes increasingly unhinged and insane, while we had seen signs for a while. And this is most clearly seen in his second Drink Champs interview, where he seems to get farmed for engagement in controversial takes on October 16, 2022. Just 3 weeks before the release of Her Loss, Kanye calls Drake the greatest rapper ever. And he admits that when Drake beefs with someone, it isn't as simple as dropping a diss track, saying he's gonna set it up like war. It sounds like he's speaking from experience as he acknowledges Drake's calculated and tactical game of slowly destroying his enemies, like he's done with Kanye and how he came for his marriage. But speaking of Her Loss, Drake reveals more of the complexities to his relationship with Kanye, revealing that their apparent truce and reunion was indeed short-lived and temporary. Now, a reminder, Drake did warn us that Kanye's persistent hopes for a reunion and online apologies were often fake and not as well-meaning as they seemed. And it seemed like this was yet another example of that, yet one that we knew about, although not the finer details. What we do know is that Rich Flex was another possible allusion to his relationship with Kim to frustrate Kanye again, and Circo Loco was more direct as he addressed their piece. And the day this album released, Kanye immediately responded on Twitter quoting #lovespeech and reminds the world that he loves Drake and doesn't want to go back and forth. The fact that people keep removing themselves from Kanye's life over the past few years at this point makes his words here, although they are fairly consistent, seem false and empty. But Kanye preaches for a world where rappers can all be on the same team and not beef with each other, working together against the real enemy which he views as the labels that own them and the media that control them. There's clearly two different agendas here. Drake is purely focused on reciprocating the hate he feels from Kanye and seems intent on not only forcing his retirement and enjoying the end of his career, but also ruining his life as he knows it. With Kanye, well, we have to look past the smoke and mirrors. It's hard to say if he really cares about his relationship with Drake. I can't fathom wanting to be friends with a person after all this when they seem hellbent on wiping their hands of you and testing you. But all this falls on deaf ears as Drake provokes him again on Search and Rescue, a song that samples Kim Kardashian's own voice. Now, let's talk about Drake and Kim. Reportedly, post-divorce Kim has allegedly been trying to tempt and seduce Drake, hoping that something will actually happen between them like he's alluded to for years. But to me, Kim seems to be a pawn in Drake's war with Kanye. He uses her as a weapon against him, despite their history. And outside of the sample, the song doesn't relate to Kim or Kanye in any way that stands out. And a month after this, Kanye starts publicly accusing Kim of having an affair with Drake during their marriage. He also says that he always knew that Kim was desperate for Drake's attention. And this is where Drake won this twisted war. In turn, Kim accused Kanye of starting the rumor that she slept with Drake, saying he made these accusations all throughout their marriage. But fans did call out Kim on this, saying that she was stretching the truth, because there was a decent amount of Instagram flirting going on over the years. And this led to reporters and fans alike piecing together Kim's borderline obsession with and love for Drake. That if they did have a relationship, it was not something she was tricked into but wanted, and now years later is interested in. Kim will pop back up in this story later, but for now let's address For All the Dogs and some key things that relate to this feud on that project. I really want to touch on this concept of Drake's red button. It's something that was reported as early as 2018 in his feud with Pusha T and Kanye, and is also alluded to on 8am in Charlotte as another USB in the safe. It's been over 7 years since Infrared, Duppy Freestyle, and the story of Adidon, but it was reported and believed at the time that Drake has life-shattering information on Kanye. The type of news that, quote, Kanye would jump off a building if it came out. It was also said that this information will eventually see the light as multiple people know it, but for whatever reason, they're all afraid to be the one to air it. And I feel like this is part of Drake's red button, his fail-safe self-destruct button that will take down his biggest enemies with him if it ever gets to that point. Although I couldn't even theorize what the hell Drake or anyone has on Kanye that could tank his image any more than he does on his own. But Kanye is definitely targeted on red button, not only with a specific mention, but the Heaven Gated bar is eerily similar to that quote I read, where this information would push Kanye to suicide or maybe the death of his career. The term in this song likely refers to the religious group from the late 90s who were infamous for mass suicides. So in this case, Drake's red button, or the information he has on these people, will push them to a similar fate to escape it and find a way out. And I don't know, finishing the song with this line just makes me think this relates to Kanye, someone many people see as crazy for his various social media outbursts and controversial opinions, which have increased over the years and likely been a product of his bipolar disorder and mania. And Drake had more bars for him on Stories About My Brother. But seriously, I want to finish this video already, so let's just look ahead to 2024 and Kanye picking his own side in the 20v1 showdown. Kanye declared himself your favorite GOAT's GOAT and fired some shots off from his notes app. He praises himself as the only person to come back to #1 after cancellation, and that there can only be one GOAT. And of course, it's him. This now deleted post came after the start of the Grand Rap Civil War of 2024 and the song Like That. He claims that he cleared Kendrick when they featured together on No More Parties in LA and washed Drake at the Larry Hoover concert. And he doubles down on his fuck Drake stance at this moment as he also berates him for taking Lil Durk on his tour right before Kanye was rolling out his Vultures album. But his isolationist I'm the best stance changed quickly, jumping on the official remix of Like That to have his chance to fire at Drake and jump in on the pile-on of his enemy. He reveals that it was Future who recruited him for this verse, and despite dissing Kendrick a month earlier, he steps in for him with the intention of finally eliminating Drake. True to character, Kanye goes for Drake's label, UMG, and mocks what he calls modern-day slave ships, as in these big corporations who ultimately own these artists and their music catalogs. The aftermath was more interesting than this diss. Kanye appeared on his friend Justin LeBoy's podcast and doubled down on this elimination of Drake. He says that everybody in the studio was energized with that being their driving motive. Now, this is definitely disputed by by both Future and Metro who deny making music with that intention, and only Kanye knows what he really meant by that. But obviously he only knew about the intention of making that singular song, which was released days after Drake released Push Ups, where he returned fire on everybody, likely making them that much more eager to return fire of their own. So in the case of the remix, that probably was the intention. But also on this podcast, Kanye explains his belief that Drake's popularity is aided and funded by his label UMG and its CEO Lucien Grange. He says that they control DSPs like Spotify and Apple Music and the radio, likely referring to a payola scheme. So basically, Kanye thinks that the only reason Drake outperforms him is due to his label and some fudging of the numbers. Which ironically is part of what Drake sues his label for in regards to Kendrick. But this is how Kanye validates his insecurities and envy of Drake's success, or his truth. Which obviously counters some of the praise Kanye has given Drake before, but that shouldn't be surprising at this point and won't be the last time this happens either. Drake barely responds to Kanye at all. In fact, I would say he didn't, dismissing him from this beef entirely and focusing on the big names. It is ironic given all the little jabs Drake has taken at Kanye over these last couple of years that he stopped now, but he did have enough on his plate to defend and respond to. And I'm sure Drake would make the argument that he wasn't worth responding to. And that's more or less been the case to this day. Drake continues to cover themes of jealousy and betrayal, and of course we can group Kanye into that, but a lot of people can be now in Drake's life. So let's skip ahead to some big drama. In November 2024, Drake and Kim were allegedly spotted together on a trip in Idaho, where the pair were riding motorcycles and wearing helmets, not too dissimilar from the search and rescue aesthetic. Kim posted these blurry pictures herself, but fans speculate it being Drake, and apparently a reliable source confirmed that it is. Now, this could mean that search and rescue was inspired by the relationship and this is something that they do. Or maybe they're doing it now in homage to that song. That sounds a little cringy, but we are talking about 40-year-olds here. And there are a few more Drake and Kim stories and sightings that have happened over the last year that just go to show that they do have a relationship, even after all this. You would think that Kim wouldn't have any time for a man who got in between her marriage, but she's clearly a fan and a friend. Is their relationship anything beyond that? It's hard to say, but you can have your own theories. And sticking with the topic of Kim before we get back to Kanye, Drake's song Doghouse feels like yet another attack on Ye a year later, in which he mocks Kanye's self-medicated spirals over the years and his destructive tendencies, likening Kanye's envy and anger to a crash out. And with the Kanye reference, there's almost always a Kim reference too, who's the main subject of the chorus, simply referring to Kanye offhandedly as her ex. And what makes this all the more likely is the fact that Drake and Kim were sharing a luxurious mansion on Lake Como in Italy just a week earlier while he was touring. So I guess one thing he did say at the Larry Hoover concert was true. Drake is certainly not finished. Yeah, the Drake and Kim stuff is weird. But let's rewind to earlier in the year because, can you believe it, Kanye had some interesting quotes. These are some of the wildest of the bunch, not exactly because of what he said, but because of what he said in the past. It shows the inconsistency of this whole thing from Kanye. And again, I don't know a ton about bipolar disorder, but the way he flip-flops his story and opinion of Drake seems like a likely and easy connection. Kanye gives Drake credit as a pioneer of rap, adding something to the game and advancing it, like the greatest artists have always done. He also compares him to Steph Curry, saying you can never count him out because he's always capable of the impossible. And he compares how easy it was for Drake to make Work, a song he calls the top 5 song of all time, whereas it isn't as easy or natural for Kanye. The funniest quote was Kanye telling Kendrick that he killed his nemesis. Where's the movies if there isn't Drake? And I think this captures so much of their dynamic. If Kanye is the main character of his life and world, Drake is his main antagonist, the villain that the hero needs to beat and overcome. And if you view their entire story through that lens, you can understand Kanye's perspective, despite it being basically the definition of narcissism. There are 2 more interesting quotes that say a lot, and we'll go in reverse order here. He continues his pro-Drake and pro-Kendrick swivel, realigning his crosshairs toward another enemy, the industry as a whole and the higher-ups who control it. He calls the outcome of the Drake and Kendrick feud the biggest victory in music history, as resulted in Drake's lawsuit against his own label UMG and a condemnation of payola schemes in radio. But this serves as yet another drastic swing in Kanye's actions and words, coming from someone who was vehemently anti-Drake in 2024, happily participating in his elimination. Yet now, he reiterates his love and respect for Drake and prioritizes his goal of decentralizing the power of labels in music, something he's chased for years. He also went on another Twitter rant, and there was one weird post, yet revealing about his relationship with Drake. It serves as his only real admission of jealousy and envy blinding him from a healthy friendship, or making him step out of character as he would see it. Ultimately, Kanye is a narcissist, and over the years, seemingly quite early on, he grew envious, jealous, and resentful at seeing someone who idolized him surpass him and be at the top of the game for so long. Especially while he likely feels that the media and society are trying to take him down and erase what he's done, not seeing any faults of his own. And what makes this clear to me is that Drake isn't the only example we can look at. His relationship with Virgil Abloh is eerily similar, but they were only closer, and Kanye was able to be his superior for longer. We can only judge what we see, and Kanye's projection of love and respect for Drake is ultimately overshadowed by his actions and moments of letting his jealousy and envy show. Is it an act, or is it truly unintentional? Something that slips out and blinds him when he's at his weakest. Something that has cost him much more than Drake, but seemingly most of his close friends. And Drake isn't innocent in all this. I think at first he was a victim, someone Kanye couldn't stand for no fault of his own. But while Drake was once defending himself, I think he crossed the line and didn't stop. Perhaps taking advantage of Kanye's mental struggles, his gaslighting didn't help Kanye's battle with mania, and was a ruthless way to win their war. While this is the end of the video and the latest of what we have, I certainly don't think this is the end of their career-long feud, and can only hope that they both find peace before the end of it. But hey, thanks for watching. I hope you were able to learn a thing or two about this feud and the history between two of hip-hop's greatest. That closes out the last video I'll hopefully ever make of this series of drama, Drake's 20v1. As always, I make these videos for myself, to dig deep and learn everything about something that I want to know more about. And I just hope there are people like me out there who find it interesting too. And now that I've said all that, I can end the video. Thanks for watching again, have a great day and night.